So, this episode of the Intentional Mom podcast is actually part one of two parts. Today's going to be part one. Tomorrow, in our Ask a Life Coach episode, we're going to explore part two. And this really did all come to fruition based on a question that came in for our Ask a Life Coach segment. So, in this episode and the next, we're going to be talking about some powerhouse truths that you need to know. Mantras and truths, they are so powerful. These truths are going to help you really remember that usually what we're conditioned to believe in society, in our culture, well, it's not even true. And these truths are going to help empower you in that way. They are going to put you back in the driver's seat when so often we spend our life in the backseat waiting for things to change. No, we're not going to do that anymore. These truths are going to help you climb back into the driver's seat and take back control of your life. So with that, let's jump in and get started.
Well, hey there, I am Jennifer Roskamp, a certified life coach and homeschool mom of 9 who is passionate about helping women just like you embrace the here and now while also being focused on creating the life you actually want. In reality, it's not about thinking life will get so much better or so much easier when you fill in the blank. Let's work on creating a life you love now. So let's dive in and get started on redefining Supermom to be someone who is present, intentional, and content rather than perfect in our homes, in our lives, and in our own skin. Let's get started. This is the Intentional Mom Podcast.
All right. Well, if you don't already know this about me, I love mantras and I love truths. So this episode and the next one, this is part one. The next episode, our Ask a Life Coach episode, is part two. This was fueled by the question that was sent in, where one of my listeners said, "I am just so worn out. Can you please help me?" And we're gonna unpack and explore these 7 powerhouse truths, which are going to help when you find yourself in this same situation where you feel like you are just running out of fumes, you are running on empty, you are finding it hard to find motivation, energy, really the desire to do the things that maybe you even normally find desirable. Maybe you're finding it hard to do the things that you normally enjoy. Not only are you struggling to enjoy them right now, but you're struggling to do them at all. And I'm going to apologize that I'm going to have to clear my throat a few times. I am coming back from a respiratory infection, and it can take weeks for my voice to finally get back to itself. And so I didn't want to take weeks off the podcast. So I apologize in advance. You're going to hear me clear my throat. I wish I could have my normal full hoarse voice, but it's been 2 weeks now and I still don't. We'll keep our fingers crossed for soon. That could happen. Okay. So I am just so worn out. So here is truth number 1 that is going to help you when you feel like you're running on empty. Number 1, the things I do with my body are intentional rather than accidental. So often, if you were to listen to a lot of women talk about what some of their goals are, or what are some of the things they would like to focus on, or what are some of the things they would like to improve, somewhere in their short list of things, or somewhere near the top of the things they list off, you will probably hear something that is healthier lifestyle focused. They might say things like, I want to lose weight, or they might say things like, I want to start exercising more, I want to feel better, I want to have more energy, I want to make sure I'm getting enough rest. I want to make sure that I am filling my own tank, focusing on self-care, maybe a little bit. Somewhere in there, you will hear this pretty much near the top, these kinds of things, pretty much near the top of every woman's list. But so often we forget that that is actually one of our goals, that this is actually something that we're focusing on. We forget that it is in all these small little decisions that we make about what comes into our bodies, about how we feed and fuel our bodies. And I'm not talking about just with food, but how we feed and fuel our bodies and what our output looks like. And again, I'm not talking about just physical exercise here. Sometimes it's what our output is in terms of thoughts. It's what our output is in terms of how we are in relationship with people who are meaningful to us. So, truth number one says the things I do with my body are intentional rather than accidental. We don't want to forget to pay attention to the fact that we are only going to be able to carry out the roles and responsibilities that we have in our lives. We are only going to be able to do that so well based upon what you fuel your body with, what you fuel your mind with, who we allow to have space in our minds and in our emotions. So, this truth reminds us, you know what? Nobody else is responsible for paying attention to my quote unquote health, which again takes many different shapes and forms. But the things I do with my body, I do by choice. I'm not going to snooze out on this one. I'm not going to do whatever I want to do in the moment and then look back on what I did with my body with regret. I'm going to be intentional rather than accidental with the things I do with my body. That's truth number one. Truth number two is I approach life with an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. So often we have a scarcity mindset, and we have this in so many different ways. We think things like, there's only so much of me to go around. That's a scarcity mindset. We think of, I don't have enough time. I never have enough time, or I don't have enough time for that, or I'm too busy for that. That's all wrapped up in a scarcity mindset. And then, of course, there's the scarcity mindset of money. If you think about your valuable resources, among your valuable resources are your time. It is your time. It is your money. It's your energy. It's your brain capacity. It's your mindset. It's your thoughts. When we focus on never having enough or never being enough, when that's the lens or filter through which we operate, you have a scarcity mindset. That's when you feel it's almost like having a scarcity mindset and really kind of operating from that place has you in a position where essentially you're going throughout your days wondering when the other shoe is going to drop. I'm wondering when this bad thing is actually going to happen. I'm wondering when enough is going to be enough. I'm wondering when I'm ever going to experience a different reality. An abundance mindset says, I have enough. I am enough. Whatever it is I'm able to do today, that's going to be enough because I decide that it is enough. Having an abundance mindset is a choice. It is an intentional choice because in reality, we live in a society and a culture where we're conditioned into feeling like there's never going to be enough. We are never enough. There's always more to do. There's always more to be. There's always more to achieve. There's always more to accomplish. That's by default, we operate from this scarcity mindset. And an abundance mindset is a choice because life is going to pretty much serve you reminders that are going to put you in that scarcity mindset if you allow it, if you don't intercept that, if you don't choose to operate from this abundance mindset, you're going to by default be in a scarcity mindset. Always feeling like you don't measure up. Always feeling like the glass is half empty. Always feeling like you're just one catastrophe, big or small, away from ruin. I approach life with an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. Imagine how much differently you approach everyone and everything you do from the vantage point of this is going to be enough. This is going to be enough for today. This is going to be enough this time around. I am enough. Could I do better? Could it be better? Do I wish it was better? Do I wish I was better? Or more this way or more that way? Sure, that might all be true. But this abundance mindset is countercultural to what we tend to believe. And when you're operating from a scarcity mindset, you are almost in a state of panic, anxiety, And I'm not saying that a scarcity mentality is the cause of all anxiety, but I am saying it doesn't help calm any anxiety type leniencies and tendencies you might have. Approach life with an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset, and see how your perception of your everyday life changes. When you operate from an abundance mindset, when you reflect back on the day every single day, that reflection is going to be drastically different when you have that abundance mindset rather than that scarcity mindset. And life really is all about your perception about it. Life is not good or bad. Each event is not good or bad. They're just neutral. It's how you perceive it. It's how you interpret the events, the circumstances, the situations, the challenges. You are defining those. And when we do that from a place of abundance and from a place of contentment and joy and other things that you would find on that positive side of the spectrum, it changes what you see as your reality. It changes how you reflect on your daily life. So choose that abundance mindset. Truth number 3 is I am willing to try and I am willing to fail. And that replaces fear and uncertainty. So essentially, being willing to try and being willing to fail replaces fear and uncertainty. I don't think any one of us really realizes how much fear and uncertainty hold us back. How often we are carrying around fear and uncertainty, and it changes who we are and what we do. All we have to do to be able to get closer to the realities and the results and the circumstances and what we think and feel every day, to bring us closer to that, it's to replace fear and uncertainty with the ability to try. It's being willing to try. It's just being there and being present and trying, knowing that there is always the possibility that failure, whatever that might be defined as, failure is always a possibility. But failure is always going to be a possibility. So don't let that hold you back from trying. So being willing to try and being willing to fail replaces fear and uncertainty. Fear and uncertainty are two emotions that are really hard to pinpoint. They're really hard to identify and recognize at times, because a lot of times they're really what's at the deeper, more root level of things. The symptoms might manifest in a different way. We might not recognize that it's actually fear when it actually is. So really going into it, being willing to try. And then of course that means being willing to fail, not allowing the fear and uncertainty to be the loudest voice in the room, to move forward and be willing to try even when you feel uncertain or even when fear is present. It's moving forward anyway. And it's amazing how much we actually can do that. And what we also find a lot of the times is that when we actually try, when we actually start moving in that direction, when we actually take an action of some sort, a lot of times we realize that our fear was really unfounded. A lot of times our fear was, overemphasized. It was made to be much greater in our minds than it actually ended up being. There's so many times in my life where I can look at things and I can say, wow, I pictured this being so much more of a bigger deal than it actually was. There are so many times and experiences where I say, wow, that wasn't that bad. I had no idea. And then sometimes we say, oh my gosh, had I known it was going to be this way, I would have tried a long time ago. A lot of times that fear and that uncertainty, the longer we carry those things around, not taking action on something, it's almost like the bigger the fear and uncertainty becomes. And so we build it up and blow it up to be so exaggerated in our minds that in reality, it really resembles nothing like it ends up being. So this truth says it's a matter of being willing to try and being willing to fail in the place of fear and uncertainty. That's number 3. Number 4, intentional relationship building is part of my weekly calendar. Now, are there weeks where that just can't be the case? Sure. But relationship building, intentional relationship building doesn't need to be hugely time consuming. At times, we can still make sure that we are injecting some of this into our lives on a very small scale. It doesn't have to be completely ignored, and nor should it, in order to, in the name of being busy. You can be in a very busy, overloaded season and still find a way to make some form of intentional relationship building part of your life. Maybe it's not going to be exactly the way that you would wish it could be or the way it is some of the time. Maybe during this busy season, it needs to look totally different and be very, very small by comparison. But intentional relationship building is part of my weekly calendar. That is truth number 4. Truth number 5 says, create and adhere to healthy boundaries with people, with my time, and with my thoughts. Now, boundaries are a conversation that we can have on a whole, they can stand all alone. This isn't going to be an in-depth conversation about boundaries. Maybe at some point we'll talk about those because that is such a good thing to talk about. But here's what I know about boundaries is that whether we're talking about boundaries with people, whether we're talking about boundaries with your time, or whether we're talking about boundaries with your thoughts, you are the only one who can decide what those are, put those in place, and enforce them. Something I also know to be true is that the world and the people around you are often going to challenge those boundaries. It's going to be very easy for you to let those down, to let those boundaries down. There's going to be lots of opportunities for those boundaries to be challenged. But if you don't enforce those, they're going to get railroaded over. Healthy boundaries are something that are part of every healthy person's life. And at times your boundaries can look different than at other times. And very briefly, boundaries aren't something that you put up to keep others in place. Boundaries essentially are a line in the sand that you determine what you're willing to accept and what you're not. In terms of your relationships with people, in terms of how you're spending your time, in terms of the thoughts that you allow and don't allow, the thoughts that you believe as truth and the ones that you say, yeah, no, that's just not true. You decide what is acceptable and what isn't. And then from there, you decide, in terms of a boundary, you decide, how am I going to respond? How am I going to respond when that boundary is crossed? What is that going to look like? What am I going to do? Because you can't control another person. You can put, in terms of people, you can put boundaries up and you can say, this is what's acceptable to me and this isn't. And this is what isn't acceptable to me. But you cannot make another person, try as hard as you would like, but you will not be able to make another person respect that boundary. You can hope that they will. That can be the best case scenario, and maybe they will. But there's always going to be relationships and there's always going to be situations in which someone doesn't respect that boundary and they cross it. And the only thing you can do is decide ahead of time, ideally, what is my response? What is my response when someone doesn't respect my boundary and when someone crosses over that? Creating and adhering to healthy boundaries takes some time. But creating and adhering healthy boundaries are one of the best things you can do for yourself. And again, sometimes you're putting boundaries up to protect yourself from yourself. Sometimes we are so uncompassionate with ourselves. Sometimes we are so hard on ourselves. Sometimes we are so unrealistic with ourselves in terms of expectations and how we're going to respond to that. Boundaries help with all of that. So truth number 5 says, I create and adhere to healthy boundaries with people, with my time, and with my thoughts. So that wraps up part one of really this episode combination that comes from an Ask a Life Coach question that I had come in where the listener said, I'm just so worn out on all sides. Just help me with this. And so I came up with these powerhouse truths that will help. So I've shared some of them here with you today. I'm going to share some of them again in our official Ask the Life Coach episode next time. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what to do with these truths to really incorporate them into your everyday life. So that's where we're headed from here. So I will see you in the next episode of the Intentional Mom Podcast, where we wrap this all up. We'll talk then.